So we're going to talk about the bin types that we see around the country, and a lot of this stuff is probably going to be old hat for you. How many of you grew up on a farm or have been around agriculture? Okay, 75, 80, 90% of the room. Okay, so like I said, this is going to be a lot of old hat stuff. But the bolted kind, the welded kind, your wooden granaries, all create different hazards that we're going to run into. Okay, the concrete. Okay, we talk about cutting into bins. Folks, this ain't going to happen. And we'll talk about that as we get further into it. Different types of grain bin injuries and things that you'll run into. Entrapment or suffocation, the dust and fumes that happen around these things, and the carbon dioxide problems. I'll try to move over here a little bit so you guys can see a little better. Very important to remember, most Foley engulfments in an individual in the flowing grain, regardless of setting, results in fatality. 90% of rescue attempts in which the victim has been engulfed below the surface, results are unsuccessful. Okay, so what's that tell us? That tells us we have a 10% chance before our pager goes off, right? We are not superhuman, folks. Your toolbox only has so many tools. Our minds can only do so many things, and our bodies can also only do so many things. So we have to realize that if this happens, more than likely, it's not going to be good. Okay? Have you guys had any over here? Have you been involved in any? Okay, excellent. The way last year went, I think there was 7 of them that were reported that we have information on that we've put into their, used for the program. But think about that. The pager goes off, somebody's caught in a grain bin, you got a 10% shot. Okay? 5 primary categories that we'll discuss. Engulfment in the column of flowing grain, entrapment or suffocation in the transport vehicle, collapse of horizontally crusted, and then the vertically crusted grain service, and then caught in the equipment. And we'll talk about each one of these. This can happen really fast. Okay? 1 second you're there, next second you're going down. Very few survivors in this, and a considerable amount of time usually passes before anybody knows that somebody's trapped. Okay? Now think about the fact that when you do something like this, you can't move very fast in the grain, correct? Okay, I can't move real fast on smooth concrete. But in grain, you can't move. Well, that starts to go. You're not going to outrun that on that hill. Okay? It's going to go down to the bottom, you're going to get engulfed, and it's not going to be a good thing. So think about this. A 10-inch auger moving at 4,086 bushels an hour, 3 feet in 15 seconds, 6 feet in 30, and 9 feet in 45. You cannot move that quick to get out of the way. All right? So you need to think about how quick this stuff happens. Is there any reason to be inside a bin when the augers are operating? Okay, I was hoping somebody'd say yes so we could have a discussion. We need to have these things shut off, all right? Crust forms on top for the horizontally crusted. They break through, sucked underneath, and they go under quite quickly. We had a situation here a few years ago that was brought to our attention that a grain inspector was checking a bin. He went and checked the bin, went into the office, and told the elevator manager that bin 14 or whatever it was crusted over. And the elevator manager's face turned white. He said, "We emptied it yesterday." He walked around 45 feet in the air on a crust of grain. That's how hard these things can crust over. Okay? So we need to be aware of that kind of stuff. And this is an illustration of what that might look like. Void spots go in there, and then you come over the top and you get sucked down in. Collapse of horizontally crusted grain could happen in any of these types. A lot of times you'll see it in the concrete stuff. Okay? That happens to be our elevator at home. Can you see any difference in these 2 pictures? You see this one right here? That wasn't there a couple years prior to that first picture. All right? This is the new bin they put up and said, "Here, we'll give you a tour. Now you guys decide what you're going to do." It's 95 foot to the eave and 102 foot across. We don't have an aerial. Okay? There's no ladder up the outside of this thing. So it's interesting getting there. The vertically crusted stuff, Good grain can only stack 25 to 30 degree angle. Bad stuff will stand straight up and down. So what does Farmer Jones do? What's up must come down, correct? So you take out the bottom, it'll start falling eventually. Well, they don't get out of the way, okay? And then we end up with a situation that they're buried. How many people have ever been in these? Okay? I spent 2 years full-time with the Forest Service, fought forest fires in Idaho, and in the wintertime I'd come home and milk cows for a friend of mine. When that sweep auger on the top of that silage would go bad, you'd throw the wrenches in your back pocket and you'd crawl to the top, right? Well, you sure as the heck aren't crawling back down to the bottom to make sure it's working. You'd say, okay, turn it on, and then you'd let it go around a couple times and jump it as it came past you. Okay, that was really smart. That's how things happen, gang. That's where problems exist. And these can be dangerous. How many of you think it's real easy to fit up inside that chute? Now we're going to have to bring somebody down through that chute? These are where the problems we run into. And what are we tying off on? Okay? Treat a grain bin entry as a confined space. Is it? By the technical term? Absolutely is. Okay? And I'll just touch on this a little bit. I'm not going to dive into confined space a lot. But this is the definition of confined space. Large enough and so configured that a person can bodily enter and perform assigned work, and has limited or restricted means of entry and egress. And it's not designated for human occupancy. Okay? So that's a grain bin. It's not designed for us to hang out in there and play football like we did when we were kids after we leveled the bin. Grandpa thought it took 4 hours to do that. We were good. It only took about an hour and a half. We had a lot of time to play. Okay? Things that we did. You might see this. Okay? It's not a grain bin, but it's the same type of situation. This is a sandblasting bin at a construction company. That's where they kept their sandblasting sand. It could end up in the same type of situation. Okay? Again, just talks about the opening. Once you pass that opening, it's considered entry. So this is considered a confined space entry. Okay? And in the industrial side of the world, they need to have what they call a hot work permit to do stuff like this. We, as emergency responders, do not. Okay? When our pager goes off, we're good to go. We don't have to wait for permits. We just have to make sure that we're doing stuff the right way. And as you can see sometimes, where do you suppose this picture's from? Fertilizer plant. Absolutely. Okay? We could end up in a situation like this. It's not a grain bin, but it's the same type of deal. Okay? So some typical hazards that we'll run into when we're dealing with confined spaces. Slips, trips, and falls, electrical, engulfing, sidewalls configured so you can't stand. Some of the bins are to a point at the bottom, so everything flows. We did a training in a situation, in a bin like that, where we had to take the rescuers and tip them upside down and invert them, because once your feet hit the slope of the bottom of the bin, you couldn't bend over far enough to get to the victim. So we had to lower them down and tip them upside down, and they worked upside down to actually put a harness on and get that person out of there. So it all depends on what kind of bin you're working with and what's going on. Dust, other airborne problems, poor housekeeping, and mechanical issues. We all realize that you could sweep every 10 minutes in a grain elevator and you're never going to keep it clean, right? So those are things, that's just a hazard that's going to be there no matter what we do. So those are things we need to be aware of. Okay? Always assume the victim's alive. Okay? Like I said, we got 10%, right? So if you assume they're alive, you're giving them that shot. And we're going to do everything we possibly can to get to them, but we're going to do it safely. Don't ever start the unloading equipment. Okay? If I'm going to unload a grain bin, I'm cutting holes in the side. And I'm going to unload it under my terms. With cuts in the sides of the bin forms, or the bin panels, and we're going to do it systematically to get to that person. Make sure everything's locked out and tagged out, so that when you put people inside that bin, you're not going to cause any more harm or damage to your firefighters or your rescuers. And if the bin ventilation system can be turned on and you can get that extra airflow up through there, give it a shot. I'm not saying it's going to help, but it can't hurt, okay? Obviously just an illustration of what a system looks like. Obviously, fairly small scale. So, we should always wear SCBA for dust and mold. If I ask the question, how many of you agree to that, raise your hand. Okay, good. When would we need to wear our SCBAs? Suspect gas. Or, what if we monitor for it? Do you have a gas monitor? Okay. Does somebody that you have mutual aid with have a gas monitor? I would highly suggest you have it on scene. Okay? Because then you know exactly what your air quality is inside of there. Okay? Those are the times that you're going to want to put on air packs. Now, what problems does an air pack give you on top of everything else we're dealing with? Mobility, accessibility, communication. How about the length of time you can work? Okay? We're dealing with a lot of things here. And I'll talk about a situation that they had to wear air packs, and they were rotating people every 8 minutes. How much extra work did they have to do in an 8-minute rotation? And how many extra people did they have with an 8-minute rotation? Things that we need to think about. Outside workers should always wear dust masks, and I'll show you a picture of why that is. And never enter the bin with a partially submerged person. Why? You're going to push more on top of them, right? Again, what's up must go down, and that's what's going to happen. Okay? Illustration of the dust masks. So, where are some problems that we're going to find around the grain bin? Possibly this, a sweep auger, a stirrator, okay? 5 years ago, going on 6 now in Truman, we had a gentleman at the elevator cleaning out a bin. Reached down to grab a piece of debris. It was down low enough they had the side door open. When he reached down for it, it sucked his tore sweatshirt right in and put his arm in the sweep auger. Well, as the sweep auger goes together, there's a section, a piece of metal on the connection of that auger. His arm had gone behind there and cut his thumb off. We responded as a fire department. I was at the college in Mankato, did not make the call, but it took him an hour and a half to cut him out of that sweep auger. We realized that the really great deal on Sawzall blades that we got at our local hardware store or our local lumber yard weren't such a good deal. We went through 17 Sawzall blades in an hour and a half to the point that you could take them and rub them across your arm and it didn't leave a mark. Of course, after they cooled down. We had to go out and buy real heavy-duty Sawzall blades to get through some of this stuff. Something we'd never thought about, okay? Wayne came, we got him out of there, set the helicopter down outside the bin, put him in there, flew him to Rochester. Everybody lived happily ever after. Doesn't have much of a thumb left, but he's operational and he can go back to work. The sad thing is, and he will tell you this, he worked at the elevator for 17 years and he was in charge of their grain division. And he said, I knew I shouldn't have as soon as I reached. He said, I was the dummy in this situation. So it's people that, I mean, it's not the rookies that were all the time that were getting hurt here. How about this stuff? Caught in equipment, okay? Look pretty typical, okay? I was telling Bob or somebody a little bit earlier that my grandfather, who has since passed, had 3 of the greatest looking belt guards hanging in the tool shed that you ever seen in your life. Why? Because you couldn't take that extra 3 minutes to take them 2 bolts out of the side, lift that off, change the belt, and put it back on. You just had to go right for the belt. Okay? But we don't think about that stuff, and we don't take the time, so we end up seeing a lot of stuff like this. How about this? I had a kid in class about 3 years ago that said, yeah, my cousin and I were sitting on top of a bin, or on a trailer just like this. He said my uncle walked by, reached up and grabbed the side of it and went like this so all the grain would slide out. Spit his cousin right into the tank, and his dad heard a bang, looked at the chute, and as his legs were coming out towards the auger, he grabbed him and scooped him up. Okay? I sat on the side of a gravity wagon. It was fun, things we don't think about. All dangers that we're going to run into. So when we talk about these things, you're going to want to secure your scene and establish your safety zones and get rid of your bystanders. Okay? If Mrs. Jones's husband is in this bin, how controlled do you suppose Mrs. Jones is going to be? Not so much, right? So we need to make sure we get them out of the way. That's where our friends in blue or gray or brown can help us, and we can escort those people away from the scene where they can't see at all what's going on. All right? But also, if you have someone who is got their wits about them and understands the situation at hand, that works at this place or understands how everything operates, you can use them for information. Okay? Doing your seed and size up, getting your information on where all the switches and safeties and things are. Make sure all the power's cut off, and then send somebody to the top of that bin instantly, and they're your eyes. Okay? We're chief, right? Assistant chiefs? Anybody? You don't? Oh, okay. I was going to say I'd figure out who you were. Captains, any other officers? Just the two of you? Or did somebody else raise their hand? Okay. Somebody has to be up there to be your eyes on that grain surface. Okay? And once you put them up there, you give them a radio and say, we'll bring you water when you need it. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to watch what's going on. Because if anything changes, it's something we need to know, right? We gotta keep an eye on that. And especially if that person's down there and is up to here and is talking, how much more reassuring is it going to be if you have somebody up there and wearing a fire helmet looking down at them saying, hey, we're getting everything ready, and calming them down. Because when the grain pushes on your chest, that's where your problem runs into, is your lungs can't expand anymore. So the calmer that we can keep those folks inside of there, the better off they're going to be and the better chance we're going to have to get to them. Okay? Is it important to maybe have something like this? Obviously, you don't have an Edgerton payloader. Okay? Neither do we in Truman. But our city's got one. The neighbor down the road's got one. Somebody has one to get this stuff out of the way. Okay? And I'll show you why this is important in a little bit. So, grain bin roofs were not meant for us to put a tripod on. Okay? Because when we talk about confined space, we usually talk about a tripod, right? You're going to set it up, lower the person in, da-da-da-da-da. You can't do this up there. We've had people try it. You can't get it to set on that angled roof. Okay? This one happens to have a railing around the top. These chutes don't have anything in them, these downspouts, drop tubes. Cut them off, get them out of the way. What might you encounter in the top of these things? Spreader or something of that nature, which may hamper you from getting down there. So all of our entries are going to come, and there's not one on here, and I'll show you one in a second, but from the roof edge hole, because those are usually wide open and we can work off of them. Now lately, they've gone to putting ladders on these if people so choose to. Well, that's kind of a benefit to us. We have a real nice way of getting up there, right? A little working platform because they have this sitting here. And a lot of times, even if they don't have the stairway going up, they will have a platform right outside of that bin edge entry door, okay? But then you get stuff like this, and you got this little hole right here, and that's what you're going to work on. We have no tie-off, we have no ladder, we have no roof ladder, we have nothing up there to make it secure for us as rescuers on top of that bin, right? So we got to come up with some sort of idea. Your closest aerial is Pipestone. Next closest would be Laverne, probably, okay? If you don't have them on speed dial and haven't talked to them about if you get a grain bin incident, we're going to call you. You might want to. Not telling you how to do your business, but that's just something to have in your back pocket. If you have a crane in town, put them on speed dial because you're going to need a high point anchor of some sort to set up your rigging to get these folks out of this hole. So how many people have been on a man lift? Okay. Probably not a couple of me going to fit on there with any kind of equipment, is there? Okay. So how are we going to get our stuff to the top of our elevator? Now, it's a beautiful thing. There's a great platform to work off up on top of there. Excellent. But how are we going to get our equipment to there? You need to have some sort of pre-plan of what we're going to do to get our stuff to the top of this bin. Okay, this top of this concrete elevator. And when you access them, we talk about cutting holes in the sides, and I said this earlier, but did some research on these, and depending on the height, the bottom section of these, as they go up, they're wider and then they get narrower, could be up to 4 feet thick, is what we found on the internet. So here's a hammer and a chisel. I'll see you in a couple years, just in case you get through. It's not going to happen. So how are we going to get to these folks? So this is our new grain bin in Truman. And why I put this in here, it was a culture shock to us as to, we do our pre-plan every year on the elevator. We understand where our access points are, who's going up, what we're doing, all this kind of stuff. But then they put this thing in, and it's about 6 feet here and of concrete before you get up to and get inside of this thing. And here's the bin. It's 102 foot across, 96 foot to the eave. The only access point to the top of this bugger is if you go up either the leg on that staircase, or you go up the man lift in the wooden elevator and then come across all the catwalks to get to there. Our closest aerial happens to be Fairmont. That's an 85-footer. Because of the setback, we can't reach the eave. St. James has a 102-footer platform. They barely get the top of their basket to the edge of the bin. Okay? How do I know that? Because we tried. Because we had to come up with some sort of idea of what we were going to do. So we need to think about this. Hopefully we'll never have to do it. Okay? But it's things we need to think about. So we'll talk about what knowledge and equipment you're going to have. Your training is going to come into a lot of the stuff that you probably already know about grain bins, how they operate, the augers, shutting power off, all that kind of stuff. How many of you have had rope training of any sort? Okay, good. How many people are comfortable right now, right this second, at tying a figure 8 knot? 2. Okay, you guys now have rope experts sitting right here amongst you because they're the only 2 that really admitted that they knew what they were doing, which is fine because you know what? It's not something we do all the time in the fire service. Okay, I love sitting back talking with my dad, who ran the fire program in Mankato for 13 years before I took over. Retired with 25 on, and Truman was chief for 9, and he started in November of 1968. And he says, "You know what I did when I got on the fire department?" I said, "What?" He said, "I fought fires." That's it. That's all they did. What do we do today? You name it. We do it. So we have to have so many more things in our head when it comes to the fire service because of how our culture's changing and what we're doing. We do way more car accidents and strange rescue stuff than we do fires ever anymore. So we have to change the way we do things, okay? Aerial equipment, cranes, aerial apparatus, loaders, breathing air monitors, some shelter, communications and lighting, really important. I'll talk about a grain bin entrapment that took them 8 hours to get them out of there. Accountability, cutting equipment, and other equipment might be a skid loader, might be an auger, might be shop vacs, it might be a grain vac. They all are important pieces as we go through this. I'm not going to go rope Nazi on you when we talk about ropes and knots. I am going to talk about two separate things here, and then we're going to get into some knots in a little bit. But two primary types of rope are utility and life safety. And you never use life safety rope for utility, and you never use utility rope for life safety. Okay? Once you've used a life safety rope for a rescue, it now becomes a utility rope. Okay? Rescue rope is truly a one-time use. Okay? I get no credit from any rope manufacturer for saying that, but if I pull somebody out of a hole, you don't know how much weight you put onto that thing. You're going to want to make sure that you transfer that or use it for training or something else other than your actual rescue stuff. Life safety rope. It's used for any time a person is supported, whether in training or an actual emergency. Utility rope, obviously, is not for life safety. 1983 NFPA gives you specifications and design, and you have one-person and two-person life safety rope. Total weight of 600 pounds. Does anybody know what the safety ratio on life safety rope is? 4 to 1. Okay? So you got a little leeway, and why do you suppose they put that in there? What happens if you get this? Okay? You want to make sure you have enough buffer there that thing just doesn't snap. Okay? There's two parts of kern mantle rope, the kern and the mantle. Pretty simple. But the kern is 70% of the rope's strength, and the mantle's on the outside. It provides that barrier. Okay? Synthetic, made of different materials. Each fiber of the kern runs the entire length of a rope. Okay, so they don't splice this stuff together. And so if you have a 1,000-foot rope, that's how long those strands are, every single one of them. Okay? Provides the strength and the flexibility. It's well suited for rescue. Okay? Harnesses. Do you guys have harnesses, Chief?
We've got a couple.
Okay. And how much rope do you have?
We've got 300 feet.
No, for sure. I'm close to the farm.
Okay. Okay. Good. It secures the person to the rope. There's different types of harnesses, class 1, 2, and 3. Anytime you're doing a rescue, you should have a minimum of a class 3 harness on. Okay? And they must be cleaned and inspected regularly. I always figure that if I'm going to hang myself off the side of a building or down a cliff or in a bin, I want to make sure that harness I got on and that rope I'm using and those carabiners I've got are all perfect. Okay? Because I'd just as soon go home when I get done. So this is a picture of a class 2 harness. Oh, sorry. Let me back up here. Yeah. Class 2 harness right here. And if you see the difference, this one stops at the waist. A class 3 harness covers the chest. So a class 2 is only lower, class 3 covers both. And when we get the equipment out after our break, I will show you all of that. We're going to go through talk about some carabiners here, and some knots. But basic figure 8 knot, and this just goes through some illustrations here. Instead of tying a regular knot, you're going to go around one more time and create an 8. Okay? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because everybody's going to get a chunk of rope and we're going to tie some. Figure 8 on a bite is primarily the knot that we're going to use. Okay? It's very simple. Creates your 8. And if need be, if your tail ends up being too long, you can put a safety in there, but you don't need to have one if you tie it short enough, because that knot will never come out when it's loaded. So above ground rescues. Anybody got any questions before I dive into this? Okay. So above the ground. Give me a quick size up. Somebody look at that picture and what are we looking at? Anything anybody sees that's probably out of place? Okay. Very good. Probably not needed, right? Okay. What's this back here? Okay. Let me show you the next picture here. What happened is they were installing that cross auger. They're swinging it up there. The guy's standing on top of the bin, and the ring that's typically around on the top, he locks his feet in. Here comes the cross auger. I'm going to catch it. Cross auger hits him. This foot stays. This one comes out, and his body spins around like this, and his lower leg stayed exactly where it was at. So his knee was kind of twisted and broke. Both bones on the bottom were broke. And so our friends to the east over at Winnebago had the opportunity to try to figure out how we're going to get this guy off the top of this bin. I know this guy, and this guy very well. And after they were done, what do you suppose they said? There wasn't one of them tied off to nothing. Not one. They have since changed the way they do everything, and basically got lucky. I mean, they did everything right. They got the guy off. Nobody got hurt. Kudos to them. Super job, because they thought outside the box. How do you suppose they got him off of there? Absolutely. Look at this. Had this crane set the cross auger down. They hooked the basket up here, lowered him off. You see this control rope here? The only thing I would say that they maybe would want to do different is have two. Because what happens to that? It starts to spin. If you put one on each end, you can control it much better. But I think they did a phenomenal job getting him off of there. Put him in the ambulance, off to the hospital. He had to get some surgery, and life went on. Okay? But I guarantee you, you look in any fire book in the country, and there's no line that says, position the crane. Okay? That doesn't happen, gang. All right? That's thinking outside the box, and then some of this stuff, that's what we've got to do. They don't make aerial apparatus to do what we need them to do in some of these situations. Okay? So inside the bin, from this picture to this picture is about 30 seconds. That's all the longer it took to Suckeye rescue Randy down to get him to that point. Our bin has little plastic pellets in it. Acts just like corned beans, gets in your shoes. You find them all over your house after you're done, and stuck to you and everything else. But this is the kind of stuff we're working with. Things you need to ask yourself. Okay? Why are they in there? How's the air in there? Are they visible? What position are they in? And how long they've been there? And where are we going to get some of this information? From a bystander, absolutely. But we're going to put that person on the bin and have them look. And we're going to monitor the air at the grain level and at the top. Okay? Then we're going to go in and we're going to build a shield around them. Okay? Somehow, some way, create a shield, box them in, dig them out, get them on the surface, and get them up and out of there. Okay? And if need be, we're going to give them air. Okay? Be it a fire service air pack or take an oxygen bottle in. Are you guys first responders here? Or you got some that are on the ambulance and fire, both? Okay? You folks are going to need to be a vital part of this operation because you're going to need medical folks in there administering whatever we need to administer. Okay? Your O2, checking BPs, making sure we're not, all those kinds of things. They have rescue tubes out that have just become very popular. I've seen 2 or 3 different models, 4 different models now, I guess. Got a chance to use them. The thing with the rescue tube is, unless your patient is vertical, it's not the answer, okay? But if they are vertical, they work like a champ. They're excellent, okay? Some things that we'll discuss in the next portion of this. If you're on top of the bin, you will have fall protection and you will be tied off. Okay? And if you are inside the bin, you will have a tag line hooked to you. Because if you start to slide, I need a way to be able to pull you back and hang on to you. Okay? Everybody will have a class 3 harness on. The 2 on the roof, the 2 inside the bin. And you'll see here in a couple pictures coming up that it takes more than 2 people. All of our connections that we put on, no matter what kind of harness you're going to be wearing, will be hooked high in the center of your back so that everything in front of you is wide open. You have the ability to work and move. Okay? We don't want anything hooked here. Everything hooked in the back. This is a picture of our bin with our access up to it. And here's our 2 folks on the roof with their yellow fall protection straps tied off. Now, on our bin, we've got steps on this side. This side is a roof ladder with the hooks hooked into the top hole of the bin. So we have 2 working platforms for our roof folks. Those people are very vital to the folks that are inside the bin to get them the equipment that they need. Okay? That's your connection to the outside. If we don't have an aerial, if we don't have a crane or a high point anchor of some sort, we have to set up some sort of rigging device off the top of a ladder. Now granted, a lot of us don't have the 50-foot Bangor pole ladders, and some of the bins aren't going to allow us to set up our 35 and 40-foot extension ladders to them. So we need to come up with something. But you can use this to hook up to. So we're going to access them. If they're partially submerged, we're going to make sure their airway's open right away. Okay? Because the chest and the lungs are most important at this point to get that pressure off of them. Build the shield around them, scoop the grain, get your primary assessment done, get them up out of the grain, and transport them. This is not a very fast operation, gang. This takes a long time. And it will beat you up as a rescuer in a big time hurry. Okay? We may have to use something like this. Okay? So, for example, how many of you ever worked around these? Okay, pretty quiet, aren't they? Okay, is that going to cause us some issues with communication? Most definitely. Things we need to think about. The next slide I'm going to show you, I want you just to look at for a second, and then we'll talk about it. Okay? You guys see that over here? Okay. So, I'm right at 300 pounds. Who's 165 pounds in here? Okay, you want to stand up a second? Let's come over here. If I put 325 pounds of force under this young man's armpits, what do you suppose he's going to do to me? Probably won't be good, right? How many ribs do you suppose we'd break? How many shoulders do you suppose we'd put out? Okay? Thanks. We need to dig them out. Okay? We need to dig them out. Now do the math at 300 pounds.
Well, you pretty much double it. Right?
Basically double it, or just a little less. Your human body cannot take the force. Why this is so important is you get people that are rambunctious, jump in there, tie a rope around underneath their armpits, and start pulling. Okay? You're not going to get them out. We had a dummy in grain dug out to his knees. 185-pound rescue Randy dug out to his knees. And 2 of us with a grab strap around his waist, and 2 of us in there, we could not pull him out. Knees down. Okay? It cannot happen. So we need to dig these folks out and make sure that they are clear before we start yanking on them. Okay? Because if they ever heal, I'm sure they'll come back and visit you. At least I would. Seasonal considerations. Okay, what happens to the corn in the wintertime? Gets really cold in there, doesn't it? Now you bury yourself in ice cold corn, now we have hypothermia issues. And in the summertime, just the opposite. It may stay cool in the center, but as much heat's inside them bins, you may end up with a heat stroke victim or a heat exhaustion nonetheless. Okay? And think about that. The rescuer and the victim. Okay? Don't be that guy when the call comes in and says, okay, you guys switch. I don't want to hear back on the radio. Yep, Chief, just about got him. Because your mind is thinking, I'm a rescuer. It's not thinking about how your body's acting. And the people outside are watching the clock of how long you've been in there. Okay? We can't do what our minds are telling us all the time because our bodies won't let us do that. Okay? I can't stretch a single into a double anymore. Oh, wait, I never was able to. Just got to hit it farther, I guess. So we got to think about this kind of stuff. What are we capable of, and how far are we going to push ourselves before we become part of the problem? Okay? We don't want to get to that spot. Okay? So, hopefully you can see this. This is an actual rescue they did in Windham. And I don't know if did any of you hear about this? This was a year or so ago. All of this here is plywood that they had delivered out and they cut and they put in there. Our victim obviously is at the end of this orange rope here, but there are people everywhere in this operation. We have oxygen over here, we got backboards, okay? The thing you'll find out when we're in the bin training is you get more than about 2 people in there and we run out of space, okay? But realistically, think about the fact that this is probably going to be, once you get your bridge built around them, if you will, you might have 5, 6, 7, 8 people operation going on just inside the bin. Okay? Here's another picture of it. And as I said, he's right in here, but these folks are all placing stuff as they go through this operation. Okay? It didn't take them a short period of time to get this done. It took them a very long time to get this done. How did they make access? K-12, they cut a hole because what they ran into was their entire working area became a cone. Okay? Because they were throwing everything out and building their box around. They had nowhere to throw anymore. So what they did is they cut a hole about at the grain level, and they stuck the shop vac in, or the grain vac in through the wall, and they sucked out an area here. And I apologize, the depth perception, it doesn't show the cone the way it should, but they shoveled all of this in here out and eventually got a trench to him, and then they had room to throw everything so they could get him out of there. I get questions about the rope here. What's this system? They're not doing any pulling with that whatsoever. They have a grab strap, which is a wide strap about this big, comes around underneath your arms so it doesn't cut anything off. And all they do is they have tension on that, so he can't go down any further. Okay, it just basically holds him there. Okay, and these guys did a super job. I mean, they had a lot of work to do, but they got her done. So in our bin, our rescue Randy doesn't look like this anymore. He's kind of beat up, missing a couple appendages. But we're going to build a box around him. Okay? The thing that you have to remember is when I start building this box, if this person isn't straight up and down or close to straight up and down, and you can't see their appendages, where are they? So we don't want to build our box too small and have an arm or a leg sticking outside the box we build, because now when we go to try to get them out, that's sticking out here. Okay? So we need to be aware of that when we're inside of there. And they're going to scoop the grain out, or whatever the case may be. Feed scoops, like you see, the little green or orange ones or whatever, are probably the best things. We used cut off ice cream pail or milk jugs, ice cream pails, Cool Whip. I mean, anything small works really well. Once they get them up out of the hole that they fell in, you're going to lay them on some sort of hard surface. On that hard surface, then you will put a sked board on them to get them out of the hole. Do you guys have a sked, Chief? Okay. Ambulance does? Okay. The sked works way better than what the Stokes basket does because we're going to go vertical and we're not going to go horizontal. And you can lift vertically with a sked board where it's much tougher to do with a Stokes basket. Okay? So once we get them wrapped in the sked, we're going to tie them up, lift them out of the hole, bring them onto the roof with our roof help, and we're going to lower them to the ground where you can have your EMS folks right at the side of the bin ready to administer everything they need to administer. Again, not a very fast operation, and it takes a lot of people. Okay? Yes, sir?
How'd you get them through the hole? You had enough guys on top to lift?
Well, we had a mechanical advantage set up with ropes that I'm going to talk about. And what they did is the two people inside, because you can see here that from the top of the hole to our high point anchor, we ran out of room, right? Well, what they did was once they got him up as far as they could using the rope, the top two guys lifted and the bottom two guys pushed and got him onto the roof. Not always probably going to be the answer because of distance, but hopefully we have a high point anchor that we can use to accomplish that task. Okay. So when we're dealing with recovery, we're going to operate the same way as we did if we can see that person, maybe just a little bit slower, a little bit more methodically, so it doesn't look any different from the outside. But we know that once you're covered up in grain, chances aren't real good. We're still going to give it everything we got, but we're not going to hurt anybody getting to that final result, right? So we're going to work our way through all this stuff. We're going to start cutting relief holes, one hole per panel, and don't cut your retaining rings, don't cut on any seams, any of that kind of stuff. And then once you can see the victim, lower the folks into the bin. And we'll talk about, I'll show you here in a second. Here's your holes. You can kind of control a little bit better. You can actually cut a hole in every panel around a bin and it'll stay standing up. But if you cut holes, if you don't alternate your holes like you would tightening a truck tire or a car tire, and you just start cutting and walk around, you'll tip a bin over because it'll lose that stability. Okay? So you want to make sure you alternate. And then you can control the grain as it goes. Don't start your holes too small because you will end up, or too low because your holes will get covered up. Okay? So basically this is what it looks like. This is all it's showing of Farmer Jones here. And you start letting the grain out over here, and now Farmer Jones is at the top of the cone, and you can work the grain away from him and get to him much easier. As I said, you don't want to cut here or here. You want to make sure you're over in this area here. Okay? Now, a number of us have probably seen this style as well, a little bit thicker. Your overlap panel goes clear past here. Okay? So you just different bolt pattern you want to look at. This was an actual recovery in Lake Crystal, Minnesota. The fire chief at the time, this was his nephew that was in the bin, his first day at work, graduated, and this was his first summer job before he went to college. And they told him to go check the bin. He didn't come back for 2 hours, and this is what the end result was. What kind of grain are we dealing with besides corn? No. In this picture. Here, let me point this out. Terrible, isn't it? Okay. Big problems here. Holes formed. What they figure, he walked in, it gave way, and he got covered. They were basically down to the last 4 feet or so of grain in this bin before they found him. He ended up clear to the bottom. But look at everything that's going on here, okay? Look at how many people look at the corn piled up. Look at the people trying to make their cuts in here. You got to figure out for some place for this grain to go, okay? It's not easy to get it away from our situation. Again, this is the top right here. It's the panel that some of the electrical stuff hangs on. I mean, they're 3-4 feet deep there of corn, trying to get it out of the bin. So where are we going to move it to? Here's where your payloader comes in. They had 50 some odd responders at this incident, and it turned out bad. The thing I want to point out is, and you can't see it real well here, but in this picture, look at all these people running around here. How many people have operated this? And how easy is it to see behind you? You pretty much can't, okay? Need to be very aware of what we're doing here so we don't back over anybody. Again, lots of people around. They had this running, trying to get it out of the way, so they had space to work. This picture, payloader operator here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people that we can see, and this guy is scooping grain. Where do you suppose everybody's emotion level's at this point? Pretty high, right? So maybe we're missing something. And in operations like this, we can't miss anything, gang. We have to hit every mark on the nose or somebody's going to get hurt. So it's really important to watching what we're doing. I talked earlier about wearing the dust masks, or the 3M mask. And this guy right here, you see this on his mask, that dark spot? 4 to 7 minutes, and they were sucking them to their face. That's how bad the dust was, and they were changing them out every 4 to 7 minutes. So you'll see some of these guys got them stuck on top of their head because they just didn't have time. And people got sick over it. Well, we're doing what we're doing, but, and not to sound morbid, we lost a young man here, plain and simple. Bad news is, we don't want to lose any of our folks either, okay? So let's make sure we're safe as we're going through all this operation. But again, just very, very horrible corn, a lot of mold, a lot of problems. Again, getting this rescue done, these are pictures from Wyndham again. Not very easy to get all your stuff up there and back down inside, okay? We got to set up some sort of haul system and get that stuff going. One of the things that they did, and I don't have a picture of it, is they actually called their city public utilities and brought their bucket truck out and were raising stuff up to the top of the bin for them. Great outside the box thing, okay? How are we going to do this? Hey, call Jim, he'll bring this. It worked, okay? Again, cutting access holes, not going to happen. What's plan B? What's plan C? Where's the victim at? Are you unloading from the side? Are they unloading from the bottom? In that big bin they put up in Truman, I think there's 9 different gates that you can open up across that thing. So which one are they pulling out of? What point of that bin is that victim going to be at? Is it an underbelly auger? And what's unique about this picture?
Shield's on.
The guard's on. Can't be brand new. The motor's kind of, I don't know. Kind of rare, so I put it in there. But anyway, must not use it very much because the grass ain't mowed either. But is it underbelly auger, and where is it coming out of? So we need to think about those kinds of things. So as we're going to remove the patient, we have to have some sort of pulley system, some sort of mechanical advantage. We're going to hook to our high point anchor, okay? Off a ladder, off a crane, off an aerial apparatus, off of something that we can get secured, okay? We're going to pull the patient up from the inside to the outside, transfer him down to the ground, put him on the stretcher and get them off to the hospital and where they can get treatment. Again, here's a picture using that ladder for rigging. Okay. More importantly, having an aerial, this is a training we conducted, having your aerial set up such as this, we actually hooked our haul system off of one side and we hooked our raising and lowering of equipment off the other. And so we eventually ended up with 2 lines coming off of that, underneath that aerial. And that's how we got our stuff to the top of the bin. Again, had a nice platform on this one to work from. The grain surface was about 4 or 5 rings down. So we had a distance to work, but it made it pretty realistic. We're going to talk about prusiks and how to use those for a rope grab. And I've got some of that stuff in the truck that we'll bring in here. And use our mechanical advantage outside instead of having that inside and having a lot more complex system. We can lay it right out on the ground where it's right in front of us, and we'll be able to accomplish what we're going to do. So as the aerial is our high point anchor, this department didn't have a sked board. And so they chose to practice the way they would have to, being that that's all they had, and use this. Now, when you use a Stokes basket, you have to take extra precautions so your victim doesn't slide out, because that'd be really bad if you actually rescued him and then he dropped out of the Stokes basket on the way out of the bin. It just probably wouldn't look real good. So you just got to make sure that you get everything attached properly there. You're going to lower that patient to the ground, and you're going to transport them to the hospital. And as I said, this is not a fast operation, okay? This is a very slow operation. All right, so what I'll do is I'll explain all the equipment that it's nice to have when you're doing a grain bin rescue, when you're actually working inside. And I guess I'll start with the personal protective side of things. To me, which is most important, because you're going to want to make sure that you're protected. You're going to want to have rope gloves or leather gloves. You don't have to go out and buy specially made rope rescue gloves. Any kind of good leather glove works well. You can tie knots in them. You can work in them. Fire gloves don't work. Okay, you want to make sure you got good leather or fire gloves. You want a helmet, your fire helmets will work fine. Rope rescue helmets are a little nicer because they're smaller, but as I said, your fire helmets will work just fine for that. The other thing is safety glasses of some sort, whatever you got. We got 2-3 different kinds, the really cheap ones, so if they break, it's not a big deal, but just something to keep the dust and crud out of your eyes. A lot of folks will wear their turnout gear inside. Well, if there's no fire damage or danger, gang, you don't want that extra heat, right? You don't want that extra layer on inside. A good pair of coveralls that you would use for extrication or wildland fires or something like that works really well for this kind of stuff. It's not bulky, it lets you move and allows you to work real nice in there. Got a bunch of extra pockets and works real well. The next thing I'd like to talk about would be a Class 3 harness. These are built for rescue. Very nice because they're padded on all the important spots. A very large back brace, basically. And all these loops are built so you can hang any of the extra equipment you have with you. You can hang them off the back. So as it's behind you, that'll be the back side, and you just got to reach back and grab it when you need it. And as I said before, upper part, lower part, so this would be your Class 3 variety. If I took the top off, you'd end up with a Class 2 because it's just the bottom, okay? And you don't have to have a specific kind. This one happens to come from CMC Rescue, and this harness here is from Rock and Rescue. Does the exact same thing. Upper and lower is covered. It's got pads, it's got a back brace, it's got everything that that one does, just two different kinds. Both serve the same purpose. Other things that you're going to need, obviously you're going to need some webbing. Webbing can be cut in many different lengths. This is 1-inch tube webbing, and tube webbing, and you can tell the difference because you can fold it in half and you can know that there's an air pocket in between there. The nice thing about this is you can tie a webbing knot in it, which basically just an overhand knot like this. You'll take the other end. You'll take the other end of your webbing and pass it back through, and I'll show you that here in a second. That's why you bring a whole roll, so you can just make whatever length you want. And maybe a sharp knife too. Thanks for background, or whoever was back there. You just take your end. You got your knot here. You're going to pass it through like this, and just follow your knot all the way around. And pass it back underneath like this, and pull your knot tight. So basically you end up with an overhand knot that's flat like that. One tail going out each direction. You can make this any length. This has a 6,000 pound break strength. Okay, so you can put a lot of snort on this, and it'll hold up. You can use it for anchor straps. You can do a lot of things with it. It's a pretty slick piece of equipment. You're going to need some prusik cord, and have a couple different length prusiks. And what you'll do with these is you will wrap this around the rope 3 times, like so, and tighten this up. And this is going to be considered a rope grab like I showed in the PowerPoint. And I'll let each of you guys do this when we get to that part here. But this is what this is going to look like when you get done. Just pop this over like so, tighten it up. And basically what's going to happen is, as the rope slides through like this, if at any time something happens, this will lock onto here because you'll have this set up at a higher point. And you'll be able to pull. You'll be able to put pressure onto this, and that rope's not going anywhere. Okay? And what that does is it just locks down the rope, and all I have to do is loosen it back up, and I can slide it right back down the rope again. Okay? The nice thing about these is it's not going to damage the outer sheath of your rope. Okay? And it's called a prusik. Okay? And you'll get to put these together here in a little bit. The reason you have 2 different lengths, because when we're doing life safety, you back them up. So if one blows, the other one will cover you. All right? Okay, questions so far? The other thing that you'll need is a couple of single pulleys for sure. These pulleys will be used for your change of direction. They'll be used for your utility line, hauling stuff to the top. Again, just a single pulley. You'll need a couple of double pulleys to build your mechanical advantage. And we'll build one of those here. And when we get to the trailer outside, you will see these. You'll see these used quite a bit with our haul system. One on each end, a few carabiners, and we'll build a 4-to-1 mechanical advantage that will allow us to lift that person right out of the bin. Okay? Questions to this point? Okay. The last thing that's very good to have is a sked board. And I will show you this, but it's much easier to understand how it all operates when you get your hands on it. Basically just a plastic sled, if you will. And it all comes self-contained in a bag. And this will basically build a coffin, if you will, around your victim. Could I have a couple people walk up here and help me lay this out? Just if you roll that down that way for me. Thank you. And as you can see, the victim's head will go up there, the feet will go down here, and when we tighten up these cross straps, this will fold up just like this. The feet will come in like this, and our victim will be in here all protected. The nice thing about a sked is you can actually put a long backboard on your victim, put them in this, and strap it up, and still keep them nice and snug. The edge is round, so when you go out through that hole in the bin, nothing catches. Okay? There's a rope that goes along with this, and when we get it out on the floor and practice with it and use it on the 22nd, you guys will be able to see exactly how that works. Okay? Questions on this? Has anybody ever used one of these? Okay? And we'll do that again later tonight. Okay? All right. So we'll set this down. Thanks. We'll just set it down back here for now. All right. I'm going to show you how to build a couple of knots here. And again, like the video showed, you're going to look at two different styles of figure eight knot. A figure eight is basically grabbing a hold of your working end of the rope and coming all the way around and building an eight. Okay? If you just went through here, you'd have a regular knot, right? You're going to want to come around and come through the back side and build an eight. Okay? That's as simple as that is. Now, one step further, you take a bite of rope like this, and you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to grab around here, and you're going to come in the back side this way, and you're going to build your eight just like this. Okay? This is what you will use 90% of the time when we're doing any of our rescues. All of our roof folks, the two roof folks, the folks that are inside the bin, this is what will be hooked to this carabiner that will be hooked in the middle of their back, like I showed on the one picture in the PowerPoint. Okay? This knot will not come out. Okay? You don't need to worry about this tail because it's the only reason I would do anything with it is if you got it really long, it'll get in the way sometimes. So you're going to want to just throw a safety in here just to keep it out of the way, you know, whatever you're going to do with it. But for the most part, you don't have to worry about it. I'll show you that one more time. Just going to take a bite of rope like so, reach behind, come all the way around, and come back in this way, and you've got a figure of eight on a bite. Then you're just going to want to snug this rope up so you're not straight, and you'll be good to go. Okay? And outside of this, gang, this is about your main concern as far as a knot goes. It's not a lot of fancy, extravagant knot tying. If you can remember this, you're doing pretty good, and you got half the battle. Okay?